Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to Breslov Web Seminar, Parshas Vayechi. This week's Parsha is the last Parsha in the book of Bereshis. It speaks about the passing of Yaakov Avinu, and what happened with Yosef and the brothers, and the blessings, and the burial of Yaakov, and what happened after the brothers returned to Egypt with Yosef, and so on. The Parsha starts off, Vayechi Yaakov. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. He lived 147 years. Okay? Last week's Parsha, Vayigash, it says Yaakov, when he descended to Egypt, came before Paro. Paro asked him, "How old are you?" Why? Well, this Rashi brings, I think, it's a Medrash, that this Paro lived for a couple of hundred years. And when Avraham descended to Egypt with Sarah, he saw Avram. Then he saw Yaakov, which was about 250 years later. And he looks at him and he says, "You're the same guy I saw a couple of hundred years ago." All right? He said, "No, I'm 130 years old. I may look old like Avraham, I may look that way, but ma'at v'roim hoyu yimei shnei chayai. Few and numbered and suffering years that I live, the 130 years that I am today." Right? That's what Yaakov said to Paro. And then it says he lived in Egypt 17 years. He lived. The Balaturim says, what's this living? Right? Because Yaakov, first of all, when he said he looked like Avraham, because he looked like Avraham. Why did he look like Avraham? I mean, people's faces are not really the same. They do look similar, but he looked like him because he kept up the values of Avraham. Despite all the 130 years of suffering, because he had to suffer with a twin brother, Yosef, and he had to suffer fleeing from his home to go to Lavan, and then to meet Yosef on the way back. Then Yosef was taken from him, and so on and so forth. This was the life that Yaakov lived. And Yosef was absent 22 years in his life. But now he got together in Egypt. Vayechi Yaakov. He lived. The Baal HaTurim, and it's a Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, says that Yaakov did not pass away in Egypt until he saw 600,000 descendants. 600,000 descendants. He came down to Egypt, as in last week's Pasha, with 70 souls. His children, his sons, grandsons, and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. He came down with 70 souls. Then in 17 years, he saw 70 grow to 600,000. The exponential growth is almost impossible to understand, except that the Gemara says that that time people gave birth when they were 8 years old. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. So that people 8 years old, so that in a couple of years, 16 years, Yaakov's children could have proliferated quite a bit. But imagine that. He's got 70 souls, now he's got 600,000. Which meant that every day there was a birth, several births, many births, right? Well, here's a bar mitzvah, here's a wedding, here's a bris, here's a kiddush, right? Yaakov Avinu, Shever Brachos, whatever. The poor guy was schlepped around minute after minute after minute in order to be able to join all the simchas of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, his great-great-grandchildren as they proliferated so greatly. It was a blessing. It's a blessing that could happen to all of us right? Instead of having one or two children that at the end of the time you don't know where you're going to turn and whatnot, Yaakov Avinu had many grandchildren to take care of him. He didn't have to worry about an old age home and all that other kind of stuff. Vayechi Yaakov. Yaakov lived in Egypt. He had a life. He was able, after 130 rough, frustrating, and challenging years, to be able to live and enjoy life and see his children grow into a mighty nation, a nation that has lasted till today. From then till today, right? It's some 3,400 years, whatever, and 3,500 years, and we're still here, Baruch Hashem. So Vayechi Yaakov. And then Yaakov got ill, and he calls over Yosef, and he tells him, please bury me in the land of Israel. Rashi explains that he doesn't want to be made into an idolatry, because when he came to Egypt, the famine stopped. So he didn't want to be made into an idolatry. Secondly, he didn't want to have to suffer the Gilgul Mechilos, which we'll explain in 1 minute, to go back to the land of Israel and then rise in the resurrection. Talmud teaches that the resurrection will take place in the land of Israel. And what happens for the people is that those who are buried in the diaspora, they will have to go through the ground, travel through the ground. They will be brought to the land of Israel, and there they will be resurrected. Their bodies will be rebuilt, and that Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection, will take place in the land of Israel. Yaakov did not want to have that suffering of having to be brought to the land of Israel underground, and therefore he wanted to be buried in the land of Israel itself. Okay, now what's the lesson for us? The lesson for us is several things. One, as the prophets foresaw, as the Talmud foresaw, that the land of Israel will be resurrected before Mashiach comes. Even before Mashiach comes, we will find a resurrection taking place in the land of Israel. It may not be the bodies of people, it may not be those long departed, but it will be the resurrection of the land itself. And this is one of the most incredible phenomenons that is taking place today, that despite all the problems that are being caused, we had a Hillary Clinton, Yimach Shema, who stopped the building in the land of Israel, and so on. There are others, and still the building goes on. Building takes place. Building goes forward. And resurrection takes place. It's a resurrection of a nation that was trod upon for thousands of years in exile, and they're building themselves up. Israel is now regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, country with high tech, and so on. And it's a resurrection of a people that are coming to light, that they have to be dealt with. They cannot be suppressed or oppressed as they were till now. That is what the Parsha is beginning to tell us. And Yaakov calls forth Yosef, and he tells him, I am dying, and I want to be buried in the land of Israel. And I know that I want you to bury me in the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And I know that I did not bury your mother there, the tomb of Rachel. Why was your mother, Rachel, not buried in the tomb of Machpelah? Well, several reasons. One, the tomb of Machpelah was meant for burial of 4 couples: Adam and Eve, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. 4 couples. It's called Machpelah. It doubled. Kiryat Arba, the city of 4, and it's Machpelah, doubled. So it's 8. These are the 8 people buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. The Medrash tells us there are 3 places that nobody could challenge the Jewish right of ownership. One is Hebron, because the Torah in chapter 23 in Genesis tells us that Avram paid for the property. It belongs to him and his children. Yaakov, in Parshas Vayishlach, chapter 34, he bought the property, chapter 33, excuse me. He bought the property of Shechem, the city of Shem, Nablus. And King David bought the property where Yerushalayim, the Temple Mount, is. So these three properties could never be challenged as not being Jewish ownership. And if you look at today, each one is heatedly contested as to who the ownership really belongs to. We need the resurrection. We need to bring things back to life. We need to show that we are a nation that is completely given over to Hashem. Hashem is eternal. Our Torah is eternal. We are eternal. And if we can do that, we won't have these contentious problems to face. We will be able to live like a normal country. So Yaakov calls Yosef, tells him, bury me in the land of Israel. I want to be in the land of resurrection. I want to be in a land, I want to be connected. I want my children to always be connected to me in the land of the living, a land where life goes on and life continues. And that's what Yaakov Avinu's request of Yosef was. Then we have the interesting story of Yosef brought his two children, Menashe and Ephraim. He brought them to Yaakov, and he asked Yaakov to bless them. And the Torah tells us an odd thing. Menashe was the eldest, and Yosef placed him opposite Yaakov's right hand. The right hand being always considered the stronger of the hands. And Ephraim was placed opposite Yaakov's left hand. Okay? Yaakov, in order to bless them, Sikel es Yodov, he crossed his arms with wisdom. He blessed Ephraim with his right hand. He crossed over, and Menashe with his left hand. And there are many commentaries on this, but Reb Nosson has one that's really an amazing idea from Rabbi Nachman's teaching. Rabbi Nachman teaches that there are two levels in serving God. One is called Aye, where is God? The other is called Mole, the world is filled with God's glory. There are those who are always on the up and up and up and always looking for God on higher and higher levels. There are those who, the average person, we're the average people. The world is filled, but we have to find God where we are. Not that we're, heading into the stratosphere. Menashe is from the word Nashani, from the word Nashani Elikim, God made me forget, which means that he keeps on going beyond what he was. He goes back and forth, and he keeps on going and going and going higher and higher, and I forget my earlier attainments, and I'm going to go higher. I'm going to forget those attainments and go higher and go higher and go higher. That is what Menashe represents. Those who are on the level of Aye, those who are constantly ascending the ladder in serving Hashem. Ephraim was so called Ki Efrani Elukim Be'eretz Oni. Ephraim was so called that God made me prosper and spread out even in my land, on the low levels. That's Ephraim. Yosef obviously said the greater blessing should go to the greater person, and the lower blessing goes to the lower person. Yaakov, Sikel is Yodov. He put Seichel, Chochmah into it, and he explained it differently. He said, Ephraim, the small guy, needs the greater blessing. He's not there yet. He doesn't understand yet the greatness of Hashem. He can't grasp that Hashem is all over so far, he can also go higher and higher. Right? He can also go to that level. So he put his right hand, his stronger, greater blessing on Ephraim. Whereas Manasseh, he gave the lesser blessing because he has to know how to relate to the people on the lower level. That's the power what Yaakov Avinu was trying to bring into the tribes, into Manasseh and Ephraim. So we have to do that too. We have to know that wherever we are, Hashem is with us, and on the higher levels, we have to know how to go down and help those who are not as yet reaching our level. Then we have the blessings of Yaakov to the children, to all the children. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and so on. And each blessing, each tribe had a different blessing. Each tribe had something that they individually needed. And this is where we learned about the individuality of every single person. This one is like a wolf, Binyamin. This one is like a lion, Yehuda. This one could be silent and sneaky and yet powerful as a snake. That's done. Naphtali has the speed of a deer, and so on. At the end, Rashi says that all the tribes were included in each of the brachas. So that each blessing, though there is an individuality to each person, you really have connection to somebody else. And though you have connection to somebody else, you are an incredible individual unto yourself. And that is what Yaakov Avinu wanted to bring out in the blessings. To bring out that each person has his strengths, each person has his weaknesses. Together we can do incredible things. Together we can build an entire nation. Together we can build ourselves and make ourselves resurrected and bring ourselves. At the end of the parsha, it speaks about Yaakov's passing and how he was brought to the land of Israel. And when the brothers came back to Egypt, they were afraid, well, now that daddy's gone, who knows what's going to happen to us? Maybe Yosef will now, the snake will rear its head and whatnot. And the Torah tells us, these could be real feelings. Families, after all, do have differences. And nothing is more guaranteed to tear a family apart than an inheritance. And they all inherited from Yaakov something. And who knows, Yosef, as the lead man, maybe take it away from all of them, as has happened in families. And Yosef says to them, no, I'm a selfless leader. I have self-sacrifice, right? You maybe thought to sell me into slavery, and you thought it as a bad thing. God thought it as a good thing. It turned out, well, don't worry. I am not against you. I am for you. I will be with you. I will serve you. I will provide for you. I will do what I can. And at the end, Yosef was buried in Egypt. He could not have been released as a viceroy who did so much good for Egypt. They wouldn't have released his body. Eventually he did go out in Pashas B'Shalach. We see that Moshe took the bones of Yosef out of Egypt into Israel. But for the time being, right, the tzaddik is buried. He's in Egypt, he's in exile, and we lost him. And that's how the book of Bereshis ends, that we're in exile. We are in exile, and the bondage is going to get even worse. But know that at the end, everything will turn out right. Hashem will be with us, Hashem is with us, and Hashem will take us out of exile to the point that we will all, God willing, find our place in the land of Israel, in the land of resurrection. We will find ourselves physically, spiritually, financially, emotionally rejuvenated and resurrected to the point that we all have a good life, a healthy life, a life of longevity, where we all come to recognize Hashem and internalize Him in every part of our lives. Amen v'amen.